When should families ideally start talking about post-high school alternatives?
So, in the way of advice, I think one is start early. All too often, and one of the main reasons why we got our funding to start this program in the first place is that all too often folks get to that last year of high school, their senior year or whichever year it is in that, and that's when they start thinking about these things, and it feels panicky, it feels too late, it feels intense. We really encourage folks to begin to really think concretely about this in that transition from middle school to high school or 8th grade to 9th grade. And it's not to say that we ask people in 8th grade to be like, okay, what school are you going to and what's your major going to be and so on. But we do get folks really thinking about what are those functional skills that is going to allow them to be successful in whatever they do on the other side of high school. And so in our program, we've got kind of a quad of skills. Obviously, social interaction skills and that side of things, and social engagement skills is one. Our field really loves to talk about self-advocacy. In our program, we talk about self-awareness as a precursor and a pathway towards self-advocacy. And we really emphasize for students thinking about their own ability to understand how autism impacts them, how maybe other identities and other diagnoses impact them as well, and how that confluence of identity and personal characteristics lead to understanding about strengths, understanding about goals and areas where support might be needed, and just that journey from self-awareness to self-determination and then to self-advocacy, where you're asking other people for support or help or resources or whatever it might be in that way. We also talk obviously about executive functioning skills and then daily living skills or adulting skills, however you like to say that. But that emphasis on those functional skills on a year by year basis really then helps folks think much more realistically and concretely about that journey towards post-secondary education and what type of learning environment may be a good fit, may not be a good fit, and so on. Again, I mean, we're graduating 18 to 21-year-olds from high school with autism. It's still going to take time, as is reasonable, for folks to really grow into their true interdependent adult selves. And we just believe really strongly in our high school work that starting that awareness in those conversations as early as possible goes a really long way to better outcomes and better plans in place, and not feeling so intense and pressuring.
Can you talk about the importance of building a healthy personal identity?
And then, we're probably biased in this way, but like we really believe in a mental wellness counseling approach to identity development and coping skills, and understanding the intersection between autistic identity and anxiety and perhaps depression and loneliness and things like that, and wanting our students to grow into a really positive self-identity around autism. Because one of the things that we've noticed, and I think this is probably true for many of your listeners, folks who have a positive identity with autism, I think tend to enjoy greater access to the supports that are available. And folks that don't have that positive identity tend to distance themselves from supports a little bit more. I do think in sort of a concrete way, I imagine a 15-year-old on the spectrum in high school, the important opportunity for that young person to really look at themselves in a positive way, to not feel shame or isolation around autism, but to feel pride and joy about it, that allows them to connect into other communities and to connect into other groups and to advocate for themselves eventually.
Can you discuss some alternative paths other than immediately heading to college after graduation?
Well, certainly to the latter part of that question, absolutely there are a number of, we'll say, other paths than sort of straight from high school to four-year college that students can be very successful with. I think the best advice that I can give is just to take your time and not look at this as a race to run quickly and win. There's no trophy, there's no better outcome, there's no reward for going through this process from high school into whatever's next as quickly as possible. And that's not to say that I don't understand some of the very real pushbacks around things like wanting to graduate with their cohort and peers and friends, or feeling older than their peers age-wise or whatever it might be, or feeling kind of behind in a way. Those are very real things. But when folks take their time with this learning process and sort of this transition into adulthood, I think we see better outcomes enjoyed. One example that I'll give might be from a very bright young person who, if you just sort of looked at things on paper and metrics and so on, like SAT scores and GPA and IQ, probably traditionally would have been expected to go straight from high school graduation to a 4-year college. This particular young person stayed living at home, went to community college in a part-time fashion for a little while, increased the degree of decreased the degree of part-timeness over time, added in a part-time job over time, transitioned to a 4-year university, still local and still living at home over time as well, after graduating from the community college environment and earning that degree, but still started off with the 4-year university in a part-time fashion, and increasing the course load and credit hours over time, maintaining that part-time job and so on. And so that journey did not look like a 4-year journey. It was longer than that. But that pace and that stretching out and that reduction of pressure to do things just like everybody else at the speed of everything else was exactly what that student needed to grow, develop, thrive, become more, I'll use the word mature, although I think that's a loaded word in this space and context and environment. But I'll reframe that maturity in a more specific way to say to become more goal directed. When I met that student earlier on in their journey with this, asking them to identify a goal, I mean, you might have thought that I was asking the student to do something terrible. It was just not happening. But over time, that's become much more of an ingrained part of their learning and process with things. It just was not ready to happen at that time when I met them. Community college, I think, is a really great option. Part-time student status, I think, is a really great option for a lot of folks. Living at home and going to college nearby can be a really great option for some folks that have a good family situation, and have a supportive family, and have a family home that's supportive of living at home and that end of things, and then reducing some of the additional stressors and challenges that are associated with living in a dorm or living away from home, or the requirements to be more kind of adulting, independent in that way, and so on. I think that can be a really excellent option for folks. But with the reality that many autistic learners are really incredible visual, hands-on, concrete learners, the opportunities afforded by the technical college system in terms of learning a trade, craft, job, and then the relationships that the technical colleges have with industry and employment, that is a sorely underutilized pathway for our learners that I wish more people took advantage of that direction of things, because there are often very well-paying jobs on the other end of things, and learning environments that suit the strengths and gifts and learning profiles, if you will, of many of our learners. And then there are also some high school students that college is not for them, whether it's technical college or in a community college or a 4-year college. I think culturally, our society makes college sort of to, like, of course everybody goes to college and so on. I don't know if that's always the healthiest pathway with things. I think going into a transition program for a couple of years and enjoying those learning opportunities and social opportunities and vocational opportunities can be a great fit for a number of students. Going into the workforce from high school as well is a really excellent and valid pathway as well for folks that's a good fit and a desired fit with that. So there's a number of options that folks can access and enjoy. And again, I think the opportunity to think less panicky about that by starting these conversations earlier on at the beginning of high school, or even into that transition from middle school to high school, can just be a real advantage with the whole long game with this.
What do you feel is the biggest change students experience when they get to college?
So I'm going to answer that in a little bit of a weird way, Matt. I think the biggest change is around empowerment. I think sometimes people frame that in terms of like freedom, right? Like you're on a college campus and you have all this freedom and so on. But I'll go with empowerment for the sake of what I'm about to say. I think all young people that get onto a college campus experience a change in their empowerment. And there's a lot more opportunity to make choices on your own terms and to do things the way that you would like to do them, and to succeed and screw up on your own terms in an empowered way with things. And I think what I love about what we are doing here at Emory is that we are taking that empowerment and creating more structure and opportunities that allow empowerment to turn into celebration and belonging. Because I think one of the risky things that I think I've noticed over time is that with that empowerment can also come isolation. Many of our learners experience a degree of anxiety and perhaps lack of interest in relationships in some ways, or disempowerment from forging relationships and so on. And because everybody is perceived to be have their own answers to things and going to parties or hanging out with friends or making new friends and so on and so forth, if you may be lacking the confidence, motivation, or there's some additional anxiety around doing that, that empowerment can turn into isolation really quickly and easily with things. And I think anybody can experience that. I know I experienced that as a college student at times myself. So there's a lot of risk in that empowerment or freedom, if that's a better framework for you to think about that. I'm really proud that here at Emory we can support students in using that empowerment and leaning into it, but then finding community and finding belonging and avoiding that isolation that folks can experience. I think that's a huge change. I think for any of us that reflect back on our college years, there's a way to narrate our own growth and stories through that lens, and that's how you find your tribe, that's how you find your people, and that's how you find some of your lifelong friends, hopefully, or maybe it's how you find your career passions and what will buoy you in that sense in adulthood, and a number of other things that way.
Big thanks to Matt Segall and the Emory Autism Center. Please subscribe to Inclusive Academia.